Ladies and gentlemen, it's a crazy time to be alive. So much happening. Today we're going to bust out the most important things that we should be focused on today in these turmoil times in order to keep a level headed approach, not be phased by what's happening, and take the pounding 7 times. A righteous man will fall, 7 times he will rise. Yehi Melech HaMashiach, long live the King Mashiach. We are 2020, not too far from the election, in the midst of all the riots, in the midst of globalism, faith, morals, the modern void, the vision, the example, and unity, to each his own, and I'll explain each of those points. So first of all, the election. The election is a very interesting moment for the world because it's kind of the Rosh Hashanah, the new year of the world when everyone will be judged. And everyone feels like the election is very important. And it's just, in my opinion, a gauge to see what we're feeling and what we're talking about. In my opinion, from studying politics, I do think that Trump is going to smash this election. The Democrats are already getting ready to lose in all kinds of ways, which also include not accepting Trump for as long as possible. But it's almost like a sore loser attitude. Joe Biden is nothing, nothing to be considered serious because of the amount of flaws he has as an individual, as an example. The world does not want to be like him. And yeah, it's true that many of us are flawed and many of us can identify ourselves in Joe Biden being flawed. But at the end of the day, we don't wish to be flawed forever. And we try to become better than that. So the election is going to be for Trump. And that's going to be that. Obviously, it would be much better if Ron Paul would win or Joe Jorgensen, I guess, for lack of a better mediator. But Trump is the best at the moment. Anyway, so there's a lot of protests, and throughout the world, there's a lot of unrest, and this system is going to die. Many people also predict that the money is going to completely change its form. You know, just like the Romans, when the empire crashes, the currency devalues, and people start to move to other currencies. We heard that a very prominent bank in France just shut down. Whoever had money in, it stayed in. Whoever owed money, it got wiped. So that's the telltale signs of some economic collapse going on. Um, Globalism is trying to etch its um, last ditch attempt, I might say, into the consciousness of the world. Obviously, Trump was a complete blow to their morale and to all of their plans. Um, the fight is real, and it's almost amazing to see good and evil fight it out, each one putting all its cards on the table. Globalism is basically slavery. It's everything Pharaoh would dream of, and it's everything that Moses would despise of. It's everything that the believer hates and runs away from, and it's everything that the non-believer um, loves to dwell in. It is the fight between order and chaos. It is the worlds of chaos against the worlds of order. And this is an amazing time to be alive. Of course, for those who have faith, it's not a big deal to be in these times because we do believe in God in a true sense, and we do believe that things that we're not capable of handling, God will assist and help us handle and show us the way, and we are at every moment as optimistic and joyful as possible. Um, of course, we have the modern void, which is basically the lack of light creates a void of darkness, and we see this in the modern void. Anyone that's not getting a spiritual education, a holy education, a positive education, uh, in the ways of the Bible, is going to fall into the modern void, which is be overwhelmed by stupidity, darkness, and the lack thereof mission in life. Uh, and this lack of mission in life, and this lack of purpose, and this lack of knowing the vision and where we're going is going to create many issues. Eventually, obviously, they're going to find some kind of goal, but it's going to be something that they made up with, and it's nothing. There's nothing wrong with using your creativity and coming up with ideas, but if there's absolutely no foundation, then this tree is going to fall at the first sign of wind, and that's not good. So obviously, the modern void is something that every faithful person needs to take into consideration, and that means there's a lot of people that just they don't know better. They're just born into a system where there was no light, there was no God, there was no goodness and kindness, there was no good versus evil. There was just the modern void, and in the modern void, there's also specks and elements of the good versus evil, and there are some elements and specks of uh, the things that we hold dear in the religious, texts and scriptures. However, it's so vague and so generic and so translatable into so many directions that it's very hard to put your finger down and say, okay, this is what I want to do. So it's so open and it's such a gaping hole that there's just the modern void is just a void. There's nothing. There's no gravity. There's nothing going down. There's nothing going up. And the Bible is very particular, very specific, very rough, very harsh. And then the sages and the Talmud try to, you know, wrap the rough Bible into a cocoon of soft and merciful laws that basically protect people from actually getting hurt by the laws. So it says if you desecrate the Sabbath, then you should die. But then we know that the Sanhedrin wouldn't prosecute someone even 70 years. Sanhedrin would exist, the Jewish courts, and they wouldn't prosecute someone even once to kill someone in that time, usually, a normal Sanhedrin court. So how could it be that the law is that he should die? Because that's the law. The law is there to give you a direction in your mind. It's not in order for the bloodshed to occur. It's in order to focus you. This is good. This is bad. This is important. This is not important. So once you have the direction, it doesn't matter so much to kill. It doesn't matter so much to throw vengeance, because at the end of the day, we are the children of God, and God loves us unconditionally and thinks about us and wants our well-being. So he there's no interest in destroying us. It's an interest of allowing us to grow. The same thing as prayer. The reason we pray is so that we should appreciate what we have. Because only if you appreciate what you have will you use it properly. If you don't appreciate what you have, like you see children, they don't appreciate what they have, and they'll just destroy what they have because they don't appreciate it. So the prayer is not so much for God, but it's more for us, so that so that we should be able to use and appreciate what God gave us. So God's doing us a favor by allowing us this moment of prayer. Obviously, prayer can be is a symbol, and this symbol can be done in other ways. For example, sacrifice. So in the time of the temple, you didn't have to pray every day. You would just 3 times a year you would come and give a sacrifice to God, and that would be your symbol, your symbolism of showing appreciation. Because when you sacrifice something, it means that there's something more important than even the most important thing that you think is important. And in those days, it would be a sheep or a cow. Today, it would be, let's say, blowing up your car. So that means that when you reach a level that you're ready to blow up your car, it means that there's something more important than your car, something more important than all the money you spent buying the car. So, uh, to give a random example, you have people on YouTube that will destroy property in order to get views. So they value the entertainment of people and I guess the ad revenue that they get from people watching their videos more than the actual thing that you see. And this is a paradox of a sacrifice, and this is the paradox of of uh, of understanding what's important in life and what's less important in life. So, regarding the election, it's important if you're in the United States, in my opinion, to vote Donald Trump. and I'll give you a couple of reasons. Because Joe Biden has been around for a very, very long time, and maybe 40 something years he's been in politics, and he hasn't done things that uplift the poor, the weak, the orphan, and the widow. He's done things that uplift his pocket. And selfish people in places of government is very, very dangerous. And we've seen this with the recent alleged uh, situation about Ukraine and his son that's been coming out, and so on and so forth. So Trump has done his best, and obviously he's been handed a hard deck of cards with this whole Corona and the way the international worldwide organizations pushed specific agendas in order to test, you know, how far they can go with manipulating the sheeple people and so on and so forth. And they've demonstrated that there's a lot more work to do, even though the battle seems to be tilted in the favor of rationale, but there's still definitely a lot of more work to do. And there's definitely a lot of more people that are just following the herd without thinking twice and without making up their own mind and so on. So, even with that said, the question is, under normal circumstances, how would Trump behave? And Trump would behave very well. The economy was very, very good under Trump, and a lot of unemployment. Many people got jobs, basically, in simple English. Now, the protests. The protests don't seem. I mean, it could have been a very important moment, and I was actually thinking very positively about the George Floyd incident because I said police brutality and police exaggeration of power has been a very big issue, and it's been a very big issue, and it is a very big issue till this very moment that I'm saying that I'm speaking this on this mic. So I thought that finally there's going to be some filterization of, you know, throw out the bad cops, bring in the good cops, maybe, yeah, add some psychologists, psychiatrists to check on the cops themselves every time they come back from work, make sure they're in sync and they're functioning properly and not from evil motive. And they don't enjoy seeing other people suffer, and they don't have any of those complexes. They have a lot of patience, and they have a lot of uh, love for the people that they serve. So those are the things that we would want to see. Obviously, we did not. Instead, we get this generic, bought and paid for, fake Black Lives Matter movement with people that are their agendas have nothing to do with actually um, bettering the betterment of the situation or the betterment of mankind. And their agendas actually all of a sudden become clear to be something completely and totally different, uh, taking us down the socialist path, which unfortunately has a trail of blood of 300 million dead, murdered bodies for the greater good. Uh, about 100 million by Hitler in World War II, about 100 million by Stalin, and 100 million by Mao. Just rough estimates, and this is all only in the last 100 years, or even less. So this is all for the greater good. All these people have been killed for the greater good, and obviously this goes against faith and morals, because the Jewish faith values human life as the number one priority. Choose life is the staple of Judaism. Obviously, there's choice, and you have to know the difference between good and bad in order to know which one is good and which one's bad. You have to know the difference between the blessing and the curse, and the life and the death, and you have to choose life. So it's about freedom of choice. It's about exposing and being open to every single opinion, because you have to know everything that bad is and you have to know everything that good is. So the entire censorship concept falls apart if you take the faith and the Bible structure for humanity. And as Jordan Peterson said jokingly, that no editors were allowed to, no editors vetted the Bible, because the Bible is not a nice and dandy story. It's a very aggressive story, and it's a very realistic story, and that's why it's pulled its weight throughout thousands of years. Uh, Now there's a concept of a now as we get into the modern void, which is the TikTok and all these loops of whether it's Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, these are loops of the modern void. Just and Joe Rogan has brought a few people recently onto his podcast to speak about the dangers of how advertising works and how this cheap attention seeking is going on. So obviously all this stuff, on one hand it's a utility. It is being used as a utility. People are using it just like you use the phone. They're using it to communicate to other people. They're using it to voice their opinion and so on. So it is being used as a utility. It's being monitored by private individuals, which are influencing the platforms with their own decisions because they can, because they have the power to, at this present moment. If things are going to change in the future, that's up to the law in the country. If Donald Trump decides to call social media a utility and open them up to suing for people that have been uh, knocked off platforms and so on and so forth. Uh, so that could definitely change the entire way things work. Um, but in anyway, in this modern void, there's a very big issue because we lose the vision. We lose the vision. And I was speaking to someone that's working in learning actually and studying and teaching in multiple universities in Boston and here as well. And I asked him where are all the resources of humanity going? Because we should have flying cars by now. We should have a much healthier government system. We should have a um, much more advanced society. I mean, where is all the resources and where is all the energy going? Not in the consumer market, but in the developing market, in the developer market. Where is all the resources going? He said all the resources are going to fine tune the internet. The internet is the project. Maybe 80, 70% of all the resources of of all innovation and all everything is just going into this place. So we're now like kind of stopping everything else we're doing. We have this great technology. We have these machines that are amazing. I mean, you can have 20 vending machines lined up. One of them sells you pizza. The next one sells you ice cream. The next one sells you iPhones, speakers, Bluetooth, snacks, chips, chocolate milk. We have so much amazing stuff. We could have. There's just so much great things that are just hitting their potential. Obviously, in certain countries, these things are moving quicker than in others. Like in Japan, you see the whole place is covered in vending machines, and it's actually pretty interesting. But in other countries, you see this lack and this drag, and everybody's involved in what in this modern void. So we need to get our vision back, and we need to stop going around in the modern void. And it doesn't necessarily mean so. It doesn't. I mean, there's a lot of things that get us caught in the modern void, and in the modern void, you could also find your vision. So it's actually very tricky. But the point is that, for example, forever the Jewish vision has always been to come to the land of Israel and to establish a Jewish court of 70 sages, of scholars, called the Sanhedrin, and then their idea was to crown a king, a spiritual leader and ruler, king. The Jewish king would then give the order to build the temple. The temple is believed to have, if the temple structure is up, it is believed to bring blessing to the entire world, not only the Jewish people. So on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, the day of repentance in the Jewish calendar, 70 cows were slaughtered on the altar as a sacrifice to uh, to God and as a way of uh, prayer by the high priest to pray for all the 70 nations in the world. So the Jewish temple is not just a Jewish symbol; it's also a symbol that many religions are anyway connected to, one way or another. Christianity and Islam have their roots in Judaism, of course, and then of course all other sub faiths, morally, ethically structured uh, visions in the light and in the life vein. Of course, I'm not talking about the dark side or the other side, but all those elements within the side of light would have this positive energy emulating from the temple. So the 70 sages crown a king. The king builds the temple, and once the temple is built, there's this positive energy going throughout the world. Now, this is the Jewish vision, and this has been the vision for the last 2,000 years. And this vision has obviously taken many metaphors. This vision has obviously left the technical aspect because the Jews have been in Europe and in exile all over the world. And obviously, this feat um, was not necessarily very practical, um, even go back 50, 100 years ago. But now, when you have millions of Jews in Israel, many of them very Orthodox religious Jews, this is becoming very possible. Now, obviously, people that are not familiar with Judaism might think that this is somehow connected to the Antichrist, or this is some kind of counter, or this will somehow dissolve the Christian narrative or the Muslim narrative, or this is some kind of conspiracy to destroy or to nullify with its light the the half truths of other faiths. Now, I don't see it like that because Jewish the Jewish narrative and the Jewish mission and the Jewish vision is its own vision, and it takes other nations into consideration actually, and it doesn't actually have a problem with other nations. And the Jewish people have never had a crusade or a forced uh, operation to convert other people to their faith. Um, there's no violence going on. There's just this example, lead by example, and be a good example and a light unto the nations, like we say. Um, so I don't see why this would be a threat. And actually, Christianity and Islam should probably get behind the Jewish vision because it's usually basically the same as theirs. It's very similar to theirs, and you have the Knights Templars, and you have the Mormons, and you have many the Seventh Day Adventists, and many Christian groups within Christianity that don't adhere to the necessarily older versions of Christianity, but rather to the more modern versions. They don't see Jesus so much as God Himself in the flesh, but rather as as a prophet, maybe, which helps because God cannot be limited to the form of a human. It might help us um, fear Him if we see something that we would be scared of, which is, let's say, a scary guy or someone that invokes awe and respect. But that's just because we're puny little people and we need a little help. But that doesn't mean that God is limited to a body and to blood and to whatever. But of course, all this stuff is up in interpretation, and of course, this is something that we can go on hours and hours about. Um, Leading by example is very very important. Obviously, Joe Rogan speaks about this a lot. That Apple and Alex Jones just was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and they spoke, and they said that Apple and all these Silicon Valley liberal organizations, quote unquote, don't really hold by their own rules because there's child slavery in China with nets around the factory to prevent people from jumping off and committing suicide in the factories that create the Apple products. So there's obviously a conflict of interests, and obviously there's you can't take these groups at face value anymore. So leading by example is truly the only way to impact people. And if your father, your mother, or if you're a father or a mother, and you're going to try to teach your kids what to do and what not to do, and you're not one of the people that are doing what you're asking them, then the chances that your children are not going to listen to you is very, very high, because the children say, "Wait a minute, you're asking me to do something that you don't do." No, they learn you. They learn you. And as it says in the Shema, which is the holiest verse in the Jewish prayers, "Vishinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam," and you should repeat to your children and you should speak to them. B'shivtecha b'veisecha, when you're sitting in your house, uvelechtecha b'derech, when you're walking in the road, uveshachbecha uvkamecha, when you go to sleep and when you wake up. So what is all that? What's waking up, going to sleep? Because that's how you teach them. You ever saw in National Geographic, they have the hippopotamus, the mother leaving the lake, and that's how she's telling her kids to leave the lake. She's not talking to them. She's leaving the lake. So the kids run after the mother. That's how they know they need to leave the lake. That's a very powerful thing. So if anybody has children that they're trying to influence, it's going to be by leading by example. And you can't expect anything else other than that. And if you see your weaknesses in your children, then it's because you're looking at the mirror. And you have to do a little bit of soul searching and figure yourself out. Anyway, there's one last thing in this concept, which is unity and redemption. When the Jews left Egypt, we saw this. One of the plagues was hail, but the hail was a very special hail. It was fire and water mixed together, smashing down. And this is also a very symbolic concept. Obviously, it probably actually happened. But fire and water usually don't mix, but they will mix in order to free the Jewish people from Egypt. Now, let's take it to today. We also have in the Talmud, it speaks about that in the end of times, in the times that we're in right now, we're going to have a situation where God's going to blow the north and the south winds together, or whatever. Both opposite winds are going to blow, and two boats are going to be able to sail in the opposite directions. Now, obviously, we can say that that's just an allegory or an example for the technology that has developed recently, which allows boats to go in opposite directions because they have a motor or whatever. Or we can also say that literally the nature is going to create a situation where opposite forces are going to be able to have harmony in the way they want it to be. Now, there's two ways that good can win over evil. And I think in one of these options, evil is going to be able to do whatever it wants, and good is going to be able to do whatever it wants. What happens if you let depression do whatever it wants? It'll probably consume itself into grief and into the darkest, the deepest crevices of the human psychic. It can maybe even, God forbid, commit suicide or something. So pain and suffering and darkness and weakness and guilt and all these negative emotions, which are important in certain times and periods in your life at small doses. But if we allow all the negativity, and we're talking also negativity in the things that we're not allowed to do, for example, don't kill, don't steal, and in the way we conduct ourselves. So if we allow all that to consume us, if what's good, what's the end of a fire? The end of a fire is ash. If you allow a fire to burn whatever it's burning, the end of the story is that it consumed everything and there's nothing left. But you have growth, and the growth, if you allow it to grow, it will grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, and be prosperous and positive and joyful and all the positive things. And that stuff will just keep going and going and going and going. So it's almost possible that the darkness is going to be allowed to consume itself to death, basically, and the light will be able to shine to the highest light. And it won't necessarily be a contradiction. Um, in Jewish texts, we know that the only reason for darkness is in order that you should see the advantage and the edge of light. So if you wouldn't have darkness, you wouldn't know what light looks like. So the only reason the exile exists is in order that you should appreciate the redemption. And that's how Judaism looks at it. It's a pretty positive way of looking at things. So, to each his own. This is also ties into the concept of free choice in Judaism. Because if choice is truly free, then there's no issue. I respect your choice. You respect my choice. And obviously, there's a lot of responsibility going on here because everyone has to make their own choices. But that's something we can handle usually. And if you can't make your own choices, you could always find some rabbi that will help you with that. If you can't make your own choices, you could always find someone that will direct you and guide you and that give you the right uh, perspective and help you at least decide. But this is what we're dealing with today. Um, what will be tomorrow? No one knows. But I think that every nation has to re-examine what its vision is, lead by example, and return to its faith and its morals. And those who are currently tied to the dark side should try to wiggle their way quietly out. Now, I know that there is a lot of blackmail in the dark side, there's a lot of shame in the dark side, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of guilt, and it's almost like trying to stop an addiction. It's very, very hard. And some people that are addicted to terrible things, they just can never get off of it. They can never shake it off. They shake it off for a little bit, they get back on. They shake it off for a little more, they get back on. And it's so sad to see these people suffer. Um, but they have no choice if they want to be among the living. And Jordan Peterson had this horrific experience. He got tied onto these medications and he tried to get off of them. And they truly took him for a walk around the park. And that's just saying it in very small terms. But if you're part of the dark side, if you owe debt to society, to the world, to God, to your fellow man, then you have no choice but to begin to pay it up slowly, to begin to show face, to begin to reintegrate yourself and be creative about how you do it because maybe people will forgive you. Maybe you will have a way, and the gates of repentance are never sealed. And that's the wish we have for all of humanity. So if you're on the light side, keep being positive, keep being uh, an example of the vision of your faith and your morals. And if you're on the dark side, then you should try to research the light and slowly exit the darkness. You know, when you leave the darkness, you go into a light room. Sometimes it could blindfold you, it could blind you, but eventually you get used to it, and you realize that you've been hanging in the wrong parts of town. God bless, peace and love, and may we see the ultimate and complete redemption speedily in our days. May the Jewish people be able to create their vision. May the people of the world find a positive vision, whether it's in the seven laws of Noah, whether it's in ancient scrolls, because obviously we know that there's nothing new under the sun. What has been is what will be. What was done will be done, to quote the legendary Tashma rappers. And we'll be iron like a lion from Zion, to quote Judah Maccabee. Peace.